Guys, this next section is going to be based around the turtle, the 4-point, and the standing rear body lock, all of them being defensive positions. These are positions that your typical jiu-jitsu guy avoids like the plague. They try to avoid this at all costs. They'd rather accept getting their guard passed to a certain extent than turning to turtle. Even though in a competition setting, turning to turtle and taking your chances from there is a much greater option. I'm not going to try to convince you that you guys can all become Eduardo Tellez and turn turtle into an offensive position where you can win exchanges out of there. But you really need to be confident playing from turtle and working from turtle back to a higher position, right? If I'm on turtle bottom and both knees and elbows are on the ground here, Nick has quite a few options, really. He could go straight for the strangle. He could attack front head style submissions. He could obviously place his hooks. He could place a single hook. He could place a body triangle in straight away. He could potentially turn me back over to a pin. But as we start to get hot, his offensive opportunities start to decrease. And my defensive reversal opportunities start to increase. And also, the problem for your training partner and for Nick, if he's trying to hold me down or return me to the ground, is it burns a lot of energy. If Nick slams me on the ground, I get straight back up, keeps slamming me on the ground, he can't keep me down, he's using more energy than I am. So we need to rethink these positions and how we can turn them basically from defense into offensive cycles. I would say that most jiu-jitsu guys don't have a deep turtle game, because a turtle offensive game, because most of the people they face that they put in turtle, those guys' options really, most of your jiu-jitsu guys will just, when they're in turtle defensively, will try to find a way to safely turn back to their back to a half guard or to a full guard. Very rarely will they try to stand up like wrestlers do, and very rarely will they try offensive movements as they stand up. So I would say a glaring weakness in a jiu-jitsu guy's game is his ability to mat return someone and hold them down from there. And I believe that we can exploit that from a defensive perspective when we are in turtle. And again, the overarching concept from this instructional will be, if we can get up, we want to get up. So I want you to rethink how you play turtle. I want you to believe that you can reverse them out of there. You can make them miss hooks. If you're 4-point, we can shake them off if they try to jump in their hooks. For me, standing 4-point to my knees, my opponent has to take bigger risks from a higher position to immediately get to a submission. If I'm in turtle and Nick throws in 2 hooks, he's got back control. If I'm in a 4-point, he throws in 2 hooks, he either secures those hooks or he falls off the top. And obviously it would be crazy for Nick in a standing rear body lock to try to jump hooks, because he's likely gonna fall off. So as you get up, your opponent becomes further and further away from a strong pinning position and from a submission. So even if you get up and get put back down, don't let that dishearten you, because you forced your opponent or your training partner to burn energy, and you're placing him further and further away from the destination he wants. So what I want you to do with this section is look to give up turtle. Find yourself in turtle much more often. Even if you can start positional sparring rounds in turtle, I want you to start positional sparring rounds in 4-point, positional sparring rounds in a rear body lock, standing rear body lock. Get comfortable from these positions. Some of the guys I train with are so strong defensively from a standing rear body lock, I'm scared to try to mat return them more than they're scared to be mat returned. They can roll to the legs. They can get a whizzer and toss me. They can get that over back grip and toss me. They can roll back through and elevate me. From a 4-point position, they can hit switches. From a turtle, they can find ways to hit over wraps and replace hooks and turn it into a really dynamic position. So I want you to think about throughout this, if you can, in certain positions, say we're in the reverse Z here, and Nick's super, super strong. I'm trying to get up and I can't get up because I'm essentially trying to get up with one hand. Don't be afraid to put 2 hands on the ground. And now Nick has to get up And then from positions like this, we've got leg attacks, we've got the over back grips, we can hit switches and get straight back to the legs here. We need to be able to use the threat of height to create scrambling opportunities. We need to be able to believe in ourselves that if Nick passes my guard here, he's coming in, that I can turn to turtle and defend positions out of here and actually be defensively sound. We need to believe that if an opponent throws in a single hook, we have pummeling strengths where we can clear our legs out of these positions and be good from these scrambling positions here. We need to be confident that Nick securing a single hook back control still means he's very far from securing that second hook. We needed to be defensively sound in all these scrambling positions. You're going to find yourself creating opportunities you ordinarily wouldn't have had. You're going to find yourself fatiguing opponents and confusing opponents that in these positions are generally feeling safe. Very few jiu-jitsu gyms around the world practice scrambling out of these spots. But based on where the sport's heading, no-gi and basically wrestling combining, the point structure of ADCC, you need to not only be defensively sound from turtle, but you need to have the ability to frighten opponents, make them uncomfortable from there, and confused at where you're going to go next. And it all builds around your ability to get up and create scrambling opportunities. And you need to have confidence that if they throw a single hook, you can clear it. If they mat return you, you're going to land safely and find good scrambling opportunities. All right, guys, so obviously when we have a grounded opponent, our opponent's on there, well, we're on our knees, we're playing a defensive turtle here, but for demonstration purposes, I'll be on top. Obviously, turtles are very broad subject matter, and people play offensively against an opponent's turtle in different ways. There's obviously different grips, so I just want to summarize some of them here. So Nick's in turtle here. So obviously, I could go straight for the seatbelt and being hip to hip here. I could go for the seatbelt and be looking to place a knee inside. I could be behind both arms. I could be back here, basically riding Nick at this point. I could have a claw grip and a spiral ride here. So there's obviously a ton of different things we can do from here. Generally speaking, we can predict what our training partner or our opponent's going to do based on their background. I feel like a lot of MMA guys, a lot of wrestlers are always seeking to stay behind both armpits here, whereas a lot of jiu-jitsu guys preemptively are looking for the seatbelt. Obviously, both have their strengths and weaknesses. I would say staying behind two arms is very superior in terms of control, but it's obviously further from submission. If we're in a seatbelt here and I was able to get hooks, or even potentially without hooks, I'm very close to threatening the neck. So there's a trade-off to both, right? Whether we're looking for control or whether we're looking to be closer to the seatbelt. There's also different positionings where people will be sitting back here, basically seeking to throw either side hook in. Whereas a third, the final option here, one of the stronger options, one of the harder options to beat would be a claw grip here. A claw grip and a spiral ride. So when I talk about this first section here, when we're talking about the turtle, we're going to be looking at defensive options from all these different grip combinations. But again, it's not going to be we don't have to necessarily wait for our opponent to secure these grips to start deciding how we're going to defend it. Some of the defenses will work no matter what our opponent has, but we can also predict what likely grip our opponent's going to go for based on their background, based on what we know about them, based upon even how much time's left in the match, whether they need to get a submission quickly or whether they're just seeking control. So based on that, we have to have a broad range of defensive options from turtle. Most jiu-jitsu guys will assume they'll teach turtle defense only in the context of a seatbelt. But as more and more wrestlers enter the sport that seek basically to stay behind two armpits, we have to have defensive options against those positions as well. All right, so let's take a look at why I think the seatbelt is kind of a risky option for people to chase and only chase as an offensive player chasing someone's turtle, and how we can sort of we can take advantage of their grip selection here, their choice of going for the seatbelt. I mean, purely if you're talking about an opponent that's trying to get up or trying to 4-point, the problem with the seatbelt is if Nick's behind me here, if Nick chooses, he elects to go for the seatbelt and I start 4-pointing as he starts throwing in hooks, he doesn't have a very strong way of staying behind my arms. And obviously, if I start to walk my hands back and start to bounce, Nick's gonna fall over the top. Versus if he has a rear body lock here, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of the same thing. If I start 4-pointing here, Nick's behind my arms, my armpits are holding him up. However, if he switches to a seatbelt from this position, now I can start to shake him over the top. So in terms of control, if we know our opponent's going to jump for a seatbelt and immediately go to throw in hooks, one of the best options we can have from there is seek hip height. So as they try to throw in hooks, they're going to shake over the top. And it works even if Nick does successfully get both hooks in here. So he's got a seatbelt here. He dives them both in. It's very difficult for Nick to hang on to my back and control it in a meaningful way if he elects to go for the seatbelt. So when we're talking about scrambling opportunities here, and we're talking about a guy that's one-track minded, sort of in a traditional jiu-jitsu sense, that elects to go for the seatbelt, trying to get hip height is one of the safest options here. We also have an opportunity to go for underhooks here. If Nick hits a go behind and immediately goes for the seatbelt, I want you to see what can happen here. So if he hits a go behind in this direction, and instead of staying behind this arm, he goes over the top. If I'm circling with him here, I have opportunities to place in underhooks. Now if Nick's trying to dive for hooks, they're blocked. I can even turn it into a single leg, or I could even start pummeling and trying to circle out to get up. So if Nick's circling in a go behind and he stays behind both arms, it's going to be much harder for me to deal with. Say he gets me to my elbows here, starts chasing my back. If he stays behind this arm here, my underhook is blocked. But if Nick preemptively goes for the seatbelt in transition, we're able to take a block with our hand here. And now Nick's trying to progress to another position. We're always going to get this leg. That might result in a reversal here. So what I want you to do is basically an exercise in your training partner hitting a go behind, but preemptively going for the seatbelt. I want you to be placing your hand in your back pocket and blocking them from getting behind your arms here. So one more time. Nick's hitting that go behind here. As long as we keep this arm blocking, Nick might even fall over the top, or if he hangs on well, he's actually just giving me a great single leg opportunity from here. So Nick's safest bet, obviously, which is what wrestlers do, would be to stay behind two arms. So our two opportunities from here, our two vulnerabilities in electing to go for the seatbelt are getting shaken over the top, and obviously the side that goes around the neck, there's no prevention in the underhook here. And that's how we can take advantage of people preemptively going for the seatbelt. All right, guys, let's take another look at a classic sequence. We sort of covered it from the false half guard section. That was the fat man roll. We covered it from there, but obviously this is the simplest time to use it, right? Is from a traditional turtle defensive position when your training partner overcommits to sort of that hip control on the far side. A recent fight that had happened in was Dana White Contender Series. There's a guy, Australian guy, Jack Della Maddalena. A guy captured his kick, ran him to the floor, and Jack hit this in transition. And obviously that's probably one of the best moments to catch it. Is we're not gonna grab that grip, have a good think about what we're gonna do next, and then go for it. We're catching it in transition, we're catching the element of surprise. Everyone knows this move, everyone's seen this move, but again, if the timing's correct, we can still hit such simple techniques on high-level opponents or in obviously high-level situations. So if we have Nick in turtle here, he's coming around as he transitions around, if this wrist reaches too deep here, we can actually attach it to our body. So I'm going to grab her, I'm going to pull it as tight as I can, I'm going to keep my elbow tight here. What I'm going to look to do is roll my head through his legs here. And if I can, as we roll, I'm going to place my right elbow cross body here, secure control. But initially, that hand's posting. So I'm rolling between his legs, and I'm looking to control this leg. If I can control this leg, I can pin Nick here. If I don't have this, Nick can use this foot to plant on the floor and start to turn into me. And that causes us problems. But if we can control this leg, now as Nick tries to turn in, very, very difficult. I can lift her, and another layer is obviously this wrist control here. I'm keeping this wrist as long as possible here. If I lose this wrist, Nick can post out on the ground and start to turn into me as well. Start to set up attacks from here. But if we come back, if I control both of these, Nick's trying to move, very difficult. I can start to place two elbows inside and sprawl over the top of him. So again, Nick hits that go behind round. He overcommits, and that's when the timing's got to be key. He's overcommitted, and we've caught him overcommitted. We post our hand, I start looking between his legs and rolling over my outside shoulder, immediately controlling this top leg. So now as Nick's trying to move, we've got a good controlled pin here. We can hit our elbows and start to sprawl back. So the way it happened, obviously, in the Jack Maddalena fight was basically, he caught the kick, turned it into a rear body lock, and Nick's obviously trying to run me to the ground here. Caught that wrist and immediately hit it in transition. He didn't land on top. We continued the scramble, but ultimately it saved him from ending up in a bad position. So again, super simple move, but it's the timing of it that makes it so effective. Guys, let's talk about a more difficult position to deal with, more common position today than in traditional jiu-jitsu. And I think, again, that's because jiu-jitsu and wrestling are merging together. And there's basically a concept of when you get behind someone, just like in wrestling, you're trying to stay behind both arms. Obviously, superior control, much easier to control someone, much easier to potentially bring them to a hip instead of their knees. But defensively, it's a different problem to deal with. Basically, just to summarize again, if Nick's behind both my arms here, it's very difficult for me to shake him over the top. If I start getting up, he's behind my arms, so I can't shake him. If we come back down, because he's behind both arms, it's difficult for me to start trying to get a underhook in. Again, if he's got a seatbelt on that side, there's nothing in the way of my right arm. So it's actually quite easy for me to turn this into a more of a offensive position from turtle. But when we're dealing with someone behind both arms here, this poses new problems for us, right? Again, I would say we can be a bit more complacent here because Nick's further away from the strangle. If he was in a seatbelt here, I'd be more defensively focused on the wrist. Whereas if he's behind both arms here, I can sort of start comfortably coming up to two hands here, right? Obviously, I'm going to be carrying his weight, so it's going to be fatiguing for me, but I don't have the same worries. Because again, if Nick had a seatbelt here, he could just strangle me, he could just dive on it. And obviously, going to be tough to finish without hooks, but I can still get finished. So one of the tricks I want to show from here, and it's again something we did from that false half guard position, is an overwrap. A good strategy Nick can do from here is he can slide his right knee into this pocket here, and if he can start to knock me over, that hook, that knee can become a hook, and I'm stuck on my right side here. But there's a certain depth he wants that that knee to be to basically turn it into a hook wrap. It doesn't want to be too deep or too shallow. So what we can do from here, unexpected, they won't expect this, is we take an overwrap. So as Nick has this rear body lock here, I'm taking my right arm around this leg, elbow deep, and I start to fall into him as I do this. Nick commits because he thinks it's going to become a hook, but my right hand is blocking from becoming a hook. I'm able to bring my knees to my chest and hop over the top here to control it. Again, the overwrap blocks the hook. So I'm bringing my hand through so that he can't pummel this hook inside. So it's super simple, but it causes people a ton of problems from here. So Nick has his rear body lock here, and he's trying to tip me onto my right hip. So I overwrap this leg, and you can see initially I'm elbow deep. As we fall down, my hand comes through. So now if Nick's trying to meaningfully use this leg, I've got complete control over it. He can't place hooks here, and he's basically pinned onto his right hip. And all I'm doing is bringing my knees to my chest here, because it would cause me problems if he threw a left hook in. Now if I fell to this side, he'd have the bottom hook. So he's focused on the right. Before he can think about switching hooks, my knees are at my chest. Nick's trying to place the left hook in, and we can lift our legs over the top and end up in an advantageous position. So we're in the rear body lock here. I take an overwrap and I start to bump Nick, and Nick also is trying to pull me onto my right hip. My hand blocks and we hop over the top here. So look at one more angle again. Nick has that rear body lock. We overwrap the leg. You can see how my right hand is going to block this foot coming in. If I was just here, that foot can move. He can pivot with his foot. So I immediately place my hand through and we come over the top here. And again, controlling this leg is very important because now Nick can't hip escape. If I didn't control the leg appropriately, he can kick out and start to hip escape. So by keeping this leg up, it prevents him turning in, and we can turn it into a dominant position. So an overwrap from here, very, very important grip, very unexpected grip for our training partner. All right, guys, another trick we can do off the overwrap is basically, I call it a leg drag. It's not your traditional leg drag, obviously, Rafa Mendes style in a passing sort of scenario, but it is a leg drag in the sense of it's more similar to an arm drag. We're going to use our overwrap grip, but instead of committing thumb down, we're going to scoop up the shin and we're going to be able to pull them past us. So you can see what I'm talking about here. We have Nick on this side here. He's got his body lock. When I take an overwrap, if I can get elbow deep here around his shin, we're preventing Nick's internal rotation here. I'm sinking my elbow to the floor, so we're fully committing our arm to it. Nick cannot follow me now. I'm going to keep my elbow on the floor as I scoop my thumb up. I'm going to switch hips here. So I'm on my right hip. I switch to my left. Nick's trying to move here. We've got pressure. We're keeping him on his hands. And we can reverse the position here. It puts Nick's knee in a very vulnerable position here. So if guys are secured the body lock and they're sort of hanging out in this position, they're trying to keep their weight on us, they're not thinking about progressing immediately to something else, we can hit this overwrap, elbow deep. So again, we're preventing Nick's internal rotation now. Nick cannot bring that foot inside to use it in any meaningful way. I'm going to switch hips here. So I'm basically sitting on my right hip. I'm going to extend my right leg and fall towards my left. As I'm doing this, I'm lifting his leg. Nick tries to keep the body lock here. He's going to injure his own knee. So what he's going to have to do, he's going to have to turn in the direction of the rotation and the pressure I'm putting on the knee to relieve it. So as I do that, his hands hit the floor and we can start reversing the position. So I'm basically trapping Nick's leg like this. Nick can't turn into me. And if he tries to turn into me, it continues to put pressure on his leg. So he has to get his body in line with the leg. And that allows us to turn in a circle here. So one more time. I'll do it in a bit more of a realistic speed here. So if any of my opponents or training partners are getting lazy out of here, control on that ankle, and we reverse them here. So obviously, it looks like a very sneaky move, but it's surprisingly high percentage, so long as we get our elbow wedged to the floor. If the elbow is wedged to the floor, they cannot pivot on that knee. So guys, we can use the overwrap to create submission opportunities as well. So obviously we don't just need to use it to go for the sweep, we can use it to engage leg attacks. And the beauty of it is because we're controlling one leg, and as we invert, we're going to attack the other leg, we ultimately land with double leg control for whether you go for a heel hook or whether you go for a knee bar. My preference from here would be to go for the knee bar because we can actually reinforce it with that second leg. We're in the perfect position to do it. So Nick's got his rear body lock here, he's staying behind the arms. I'm grabbing that overwrap. I'm gonna start to roll to a hip. I get Nick to a hip here, and you can see my legs are floating in transition here. So again, I'm keeping my knees to my chest just in case he's super flexible and he wants to throw that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open my legs up to catch this leg here. So I open my legs, reach through to secure behind the knee. What we can now do is, if you pay attention to my right hand here, it's gonna slide down to Nick's ankle and I'm gonna cross my feet. I'm gonna bring my left hand inside of Nick's legs and I'm gonna place his right foot underneath my left knee. And now when we cross our feet, we have a perfect knee bar. The knee bar's in the top hip and he can't rotate because his secondary leg's trapped. What we do to create the finish here is I want to create a full extension and I want to reinforce my arm against my hip. I'm pinching my elbow super tight. I'm crossing my feet like closed guard, not a body triangle. This gives us better extension on the knee bar. I pull my feet to my butt and I start to hip in and we get the tap. So you can see Nick will tap about here, but if you can see the range of motion we have to complete the submission. So we'll look at it from a few different angles here. So we got our overwrap. I knock Nick down, I keep my knees to my chest. I grab that leg and we start to cross our feet. I bring my left arm through immediately, and we do have a bit of wiggle room here because again, my right hand is controlling his second leg, so he doesn't have a good range of options to explode out of here. I bring my left arm through and I slide my right hand down to the ankle. I pass that under my left knee and we cross our feet here. To get that finish again, we reinforce. We bring our armpit high to the back of the Achilles and control our hip here. We cross our feet like closed guard, bring our feet to our butt. We can start the hip in. Look at another angle. So we hit the overwrap. I'm controlling his outside leg. I bump him to the floor and keep my knees to my chest here, and I'm really pulling up with my right arm. Now Nick's trying to explode here, but he's pinned. We open our legs and we grab behind their knee here. I'm controlling both legs now. I'm gonna take my left hand from the outside to the inside, and I'm gonna control his secondary leg. We place that under our knee and cross our feet. Now when Nick tries to free that, very difficult. Nick tries to rotate out to relieve pressure, gone. And we have the time to get a perfect break here. So we control the hip. I'm crossing my feet like closed guard. It gives me better extension here. And I start to lean back to get that tap here. So I actually hit this knee bar at quintet on a Lithuanian kid. The first knee bar I hit on him, I got a couple pops, but I didn't control two legs, so he rotated out. I sort of gave him time to tap because I don't think he was being paid to be there. He was trying to do the right thing. Second time I put him in there, I controlled the secondary leg. Didn't want to tap. Full hip extension from this position, and his knee would have gone almost straight up to the sky. So again, that's the strongest breaking position for a knee bar. And in that moment, that match taught me a valuable lesson that to break a knee in a knee bar, very, very difficult. I almost think for a catastrophic break, you need to control both legs. So I think any sort of knee bar setup where you can trap the secondary leg like that is the only way you're really going to guarantee a bad break. All right, guys, so from this position, I want to combine the two simplest techniques you can do from here. Standing up and four pointing. So these moves basically run with the concepts we've covered throughout the instructional, that if you can seek height, seek height. Look to get your head and hips as high as possible, all the time, because even if they return you to the mat, we're making them burn energy. Otherwise, we're just carrying their weight. So let's look at the best way we'd stand up from here. So if Nick's behind me in a rear body lock, a lot of times jiu-jitsu guys, when they're first experimenting with this position, they don't expect you to stand straight up. Basically, again, they're of the opinion that that you have to play out of this from the bottom, and that your best opportunities are going to be to try to turn back to guard, half guard, close guard, anything to be on bottom but in a safer position. So what they'll actually do is they'll keep their weight back. If Nick's weight was forward and he was very heavy on my arms here, it would require a lot of energy for me to start climbing to my hands. But because he's anticipating a form of rolling escape, shoulder roll, anything like that, he is keeping his weight back. And what that means is I can start to come up to my hands and I can start to stand up on one leg followed by the other leg. So you can see right now Nick is square behind me. If Nick had elected to choose a side here, that would be the side I step up with first. If Nick was on my right side here and I stood up with my left, he could throw a right hook in and we'd fall, and then he'd have that bottom hook dominant control there. So obviously if Nick's square behind me, we just have to pick a leg. But if Nick elects to choose to be off to my right here, I'm going to stand up with my right leg. And as I stand up, I'm not necessarily thinking of going too far forward. I want to get head height. So Nick's head is pretty level with mine here. I want to stand up here. And now obviously if Nick were to try to throw this hook, he's going to be running in to my leg. The second step is past the first step. So I don't want to stand up in line with this one because Nick might hit a suck back and pull me back down. So I want to use that forward momentum to keep going. So I attain head height and I step past. And now we're in a position, we're basically in a rear body lock battle here. Well, we're going to cover a lot of defensive options here. But obviously, if I stand up and Nick just slams me back down, we're making him burn energy. And in these transitions, we have the potential to start scrambling or looking for submissions. So again, one of your best bets is something that's not going to consistently work against the same opponents, because obviously if I keep standing up on Nick, Nick's going to make that little adjustment here where he's going to keep weight more forward into my upper body here. He's going to be heavier here, and he's going to make it difficult for me to stand up. But again, if we're dealing with an opponent that's weight's back, just try to stand up and clear those grips. But again, we also have other options as well. From here, we can seek, that was us seeking head height. If Nick's super heavy forwards, I still have options to start thinking about lifting my hips and coming up to my hands here. So we still have options from here, and obviously that'll be the follow-up sections. We're going to cover a lot of attacks from this position called the 4-point. So obviously this is still a pretty safe position. I can still walk my hands back. If Nick tries to dive hooks, I can touch elbows and knees here, and Nick won't be able to place a hook inside. Obviously if we stay out here, there's going to be a bit more space for Nick to dive in. But even still, we've created a different opportunity. We've limited Nick's options here. I want you to always remember that the higher we get off the ground, the further your opponent is from a submission. If I'm standing, Nick could risk submissions from standing, but if he misses, he ends up with nothing. Whereas if Nick returns me to a 4-point, he returns me to my knees, returns me to my hips, then he attacks the back, secures his hooks. If he shoots a submission and misses, he's still got the back. The lower I am to the ground, the less he is at risk of choosing to go for a submission. The higher I am off the ground, the further away he is from those strong control positions that lead to submission. So even if you don't have a well-balanced game from a standing rear body lock or a 4-point, you constantly seeking head or hip height is going to create scrambling opportunities that you're going to become more and more comfortable in, and you're going to be creating a sort of discomfort for your opponents. And it's going to change it. Just like when you play guard and you don't accept bottom position, when you play turtle, if you don't accept being on your elbows and knees, you've changed the dynamic, you've changed the way your training plan is going to have to hold you down. and you're going to find opportunities and vulnerabilities that other people haven't considered in jiu-jitsu. All right, guys, let's talk about when our opponent's squarely behind us. There's a little trick we can do. It's sort of like a magic hook. Sadly, not the third hook, but it's going to help us sort of prevent our training partners or opponents securing hooks or inside knee position. And we can also use it to off-balance them. But even if we don't off-balance them, we can still use it to protect ourselves here. So it's going to be basically the same hook we did from that reverse knee position, right? So let's just imagine Nick's completely postured up. We're looking for this hook, but we can actually get this hook if Nick's here and he's postured up again. When someone's behind us here, I can still place this hook inside, right? So this is simply what we're trying to do. And how I do this is, generally speaking, if Nick's behind me here with a rear body lock, he's either going to be up on two knees like that, or he's going to elect to bring one knee down and have the other knee up. If two legs are up, we can choose either side. If one leg's down, we're going for the leg that's up. So just for the sake of the camera, if Nick switches legs here, I'm going to try to place my hook inside this leg. So again, because he's rear body lock, we have a bit more liberty with our hands here, right? So we don't necessarily have to be defending the strangle straight away because again, seatbelt is closer to it, he's got rear body lock. So what I want you to do from here is just place this hook inside. This is really confusing for Nick here because we can still off balance him. We can combine this hook with wrist control and I can start to elevate that hook. And again, it's that same principle. If I'm controlling this wrist and Nick's trying to turn into me here, very, very difficult here. If he can pull this arm out and we both turn in, he might win this if he secures this underhook, right? But if we control this wrist and Nick turns in even with the underhook, very difficult for him to get up. If he is powerful from here and he is turning up, we can sort of take a switch grip here and start turning on top. But again, when we land on top here, we had this grip around the wrist. This was his rear body lock grip. If we hold it and turn in, put our weight on them, and get our elbow to the far side, now we've really controlled him here, especially if we can lift this leg. But I'm turning back in. Once my weight's securely on top of Nick, I can let go of the wrist, control both hips here. So again, it's a little hook just to destabilize our training partners here. So obviously if we're playing around here and Nick starts getting either of his knees in too deep, I want to be blocking this knees here. I want to take advantage of the fact that he's so far behind me here so I can start placing my hook inside. Once it's inside, control the wrist. Now there's really nothing explosive Nick can do to prevent my movement here. We're keeping an active hook. I'm going to roll towards the side I have the wrist and elevate the leg. And again, we keep this wrist control here. Nick's trying to turn into me. Very, very difficult here. And we can start to come on top. If we control that wrist, we'll end up on top. Let's look at the different angles. Rear body lock, we control the wrist and we get our hook. As long as I control this wrist when Nick tries to turn in, very, very difficult here. And we can pin him. So again, just a little tricky hook. You can throw it in and it's really going to confuse your training partners. They're not going to know how to place their hook while keeping their balance. It's going to mess with them. It's going to make them want to elect to be on either side of you rather than squarely behind you. All right, guys, let's talk about the Granby. The Granby can be an effective movement at all levels. We can do it basically ground level on our knees, 4-point, standing. The success rate of the Granby goes up the higher you are because generally speaking, when we're at a standing level, our opponent's trying to either lift us or block our knee to return us to the mat. And they're sending you in the direction you want to go for a Granby. So in essence, they're helping you hit that Granby. 4-point, our hips are higher than our head, so we're already essentially halfway into that Granbying position. If we do it from the knees, we have no momentum from gravity. We've got no height advantage here. But that's not to say it won't work. I'm just saying it'll probably have a lower success rate. But when we follow one Granby with another, we can build some momentum into those movements, and we're more likely in follow-up Granbies to catch our training partner opponent out of position and therefore have a more successful Granby roll from there. But again, even if we find that they're either preventing us hit that roll or they ride the Granby and stay on our back, they are using energy because they're holding on tight, they're panicking here. I find people burn energy the most in two situations. When they're close to a very good position, they're at risk of losing it, they tense up and hang on. Or alternatively, when you're about to give up a guard pass or a bad position yourself and you freak out trying to get out. But it goes in both directions. If we can make the guy in the better position panic, they'll burn energy trying to control us from this position. So I'll just show you a Granby drill we can do on the spot without a training partner, and then we'll do it together. So you can even do it as a warm-up drill, right? So one knee on the ground, one knee pointed to the sky, and I'm gonna take my arm behind my back and I'm gonna shoulder roll. So I'm gonna roll across each shoulder. So you can see it's just a shoulder roll, it's not a forward roll. A lot of people think they're doing a Granby, but they're actually just doing a forward roll. So obviously a forward roll, I roll over my shoulder, my back, and we start to come up. A shoulder roll, a Granby, hand behind back, we're going from our left shoulder to our right. So the reason this works to strip grips is because our hips stay above our opponent's grips. And as we transfer from one side to another, it can force them to face plant their head into the ground, or if they tuck it and roll, they're stuck hanging on. So if Nick's behind me here, let's say he's got a body lock here, what I want to do for this Granby is step up on my outside leg. And you can see I subtly start to turn into Nick here. I'm going to place my right hand, my inside hand, behind my leg, in between me and my training partner. I roll from one shoulder to another, and my hips stay high, and it's difficult for Nick to stay attached to me here. So go from side to side here. Nick's got this rib body lock. I'm on my hands. I create an angle and I roll through. Nick's going to stay attached to me here and ride this Granby. Still up. I have to create that angle again. Hand inside. Nick's tracking me here, but you see his grip's loosening. And eventually we find a way to frame out and square back up to our training partners. So we want to be very hard to control from these positions. So it can take 1, 2, 3 Granby rolls. If Nick hangs on tight, he can end up face planting it, or again, I can end up rolling over his face, which really pisses people off, really bothers people, but it makes you hard to control from that position. But I don't want you to attempt one Granby and stop. I want you to hit 1, 2, 3, 4 Granbys. And as we build that, our opponents begin to get worried in that position and they react faster and faster, potentially rushing their decisions from turtle and basically ending up out of position. And therefore, they're actually less dangerous behind us because they're making the rush decisions. They're making the panic decision to control us from here. It's not the other way around with us making panic decisions because we're like, oh shit, our opponent's close to our back. All right, guys, so obviously we're focusing on this ground level defense from turtle here. A problematic grip for us is the claw combined with basically that spiral ride of the far hip. This is a really problematic grip for us. It's a really, I would say, the most superior control they could have from here, and it can negate some of our other attacks because the claw grip means that we can never, when our arm's trapped here, we can never pummel over the head. So in scrambles, we never end up basically taking advantage of that height position to get on top of people. So what we need to do is work out a way to clear that grip. And I'm going to show you how we can hip slide out to strip those grips. So Nick has me in the claw here. Again, why this grip is so problematic for us, because it's very hard for us to get any reach back here. And when Nick starts to slide his hooks in and falls down, he has this control here that completely negates my right arm. Even if he doesn't get the hooks here, but he has this claw grip, he can stay behind me so well here. Whereas if he had a different grip, he had the seatbelt here, If we connected his hands here, we have a better ability to start coming on top and turning into it. But the claw grip completely isolates that inside arm. Very difficult for us to scramble out here. It's just a superior control. So whenever someone locks up a claw grip on me, whenever Nick gets this grip here, I don't want to concede down to this hip because again, my arm is trapped. I want to start to slide out to apply pressure on this grip. But again, we don't want to stay here too long. So I'm trying to circle and make him chase me here. Another problem with the claw grip is if I try to stand up from here and Nick pulls me back, very, very good control. So again, we need to clear this by moving away from it. So we need to apply pressure to these grips. So we stand up with our outside leg, I knee slide away. But again, I don't want to hang out here too long because we've left a lot of space here for Nick to take advantage of. So the second you feel this grip strip, you want to start to circle and if we can, square back up to him. So one more time here. Nick secures his claw grip and he's got that thigh pry spiral ride here. So I'm standing up on the side of the spiral ride, knee sliding out, and that's how we're going to strip that grip and create a position where we can basically have some form of mutual scramble there. If he's trying to commit too hard to the grip, he's not going to easily change his attack process. But obviously we have to be prepared that if he feels that grip stripping, we have to move quickly so that he can't re-secure another strong position on us. All right, guys, let's talk about, we're going to cover if we're in turtle and our opponent gets a single hook, right? So we're not going to go into extensive detail in this instructional about if they get two hooks, if they get us on our back, on a hip, they basically get a body triangle. We're not going into those sort of details, but obviously I'm telling you to turtle more. And obviously in the process of turtling more, guys are going to get single hooks. Realistically, most people are going to take a single hook before getting the second hook. Or most people are going to take a single hook and then start to work to secure a body triangle, right? But again, the most common scenario is you turn away, they get a single hook. And what happens is we end up in a scenario where Nick's got a seatbelt on me and he's got a single hook from these positions here, right? So this is a situation that comes up a ton. Obviously, it's a very risky position here. In terms of point scoring, obviously he hasn't got a second hook. He's not scoring any points here. And I don't want you to be as worried about this position as I guess a lot of people are today. There are guys I train with like Nick Ortiz that you get a single hook, you're still very far from a point scoring position. There's still huge battles that have to take place here. I want you to be very, very good and very confident if we end up in this position. So Nick has a seatbelt, but what we're about to do next will work very well even if he has a power half from here. We're going to do the same thing initially from this position, whether he has a seatbelt or if he switches to a power half. Obviously he uses the power half to knock us over, but for the sake of it, we're going to demonstrate with a seatbelt. So I want you to pay attention here. Nick's got this hook inside. I want you to first of all think about defending the strangle here. So I'm preventing Nick submitting me straight away. Obviously I was lazy here. He could latch it up, start to strangle me. So I'm defending here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my left foot inside of Nick's right hook here. So you guys can see what I've done is I've pummeled inside, a little inside pummel from a single hook. And now I'm defending everything. I've got that foot inside. I fall to a hip. I extend that hook out and I bring my knee through. And we're able to clear Nick's hooks from here. I'm still defending the strangle here. What I'm going to do though is my left hand is just going to monitor Nick's top leg here. I don't want Nick to throw that top hook because he could use it to pull me to the other side and start replacing and getting proper back control here. So for at least the interim, I'm creating a knee and elbow connection here. But what I want to do, one of the best options from here, when Nick has a seatbelt from this position and the underhook is topside, is we're going to turn away from Nick. We're going to basically start a running man style sequence from here. And I'm going to do a grip trade-off here. So I'm blocking this top hook. I start to walk away and I'm going to reach for his elbow here and switch grips. So I'm going to let go of the strangle hand, grab the elbow, and I'm going to place my hand inside, just like we were doing from a regular turtle. So if Nick's trying to throw hooks now, we've got our underhook here, and I could potentially scramble out here. So that little last sequence again is we've landed here, we've cleared those hooks, I'm defending, I do a pass off, and as I do that, my knee comes higher. And then I start to run away, and my right hand comes through, and because I'm holding his elbow here, Nick can't match height with me easily. As I pull this elbow, Nick's trying to come up, but he's stuck on his shoulder here because I'm pulling this elbow. If I wasn't pulling this elbow, Nick could post on that elbow and potentially come up with me. So it's very key that we control that elbow as we start running away. Obviously, there's going to be risks here. Sometimes we're going to let this out, he's going to throw that top hook. There's going to be risks, so we have to be quick. But remember, usually at this point, you're going to be sweaty, and we're going to have to take advantage of movement in this escape. So we're defending, I do a quick pass off. I replace the right hand, preventing the strangle, with the left hand, controlling the elbow. And as I run away, I pull his elbow. So Nick's trying to come up here, even without the underhook, very hard for him to follow me up. And I can pummel my underhook back in. So obviously this works the same as if Nick, I just cleared his two hooks, or he jumped a seatbelt and he didn't have hooks in, right? Or I've cleared those hooks and we find ourselves in that situation. So let's go one more time from the top. Nick's got this inside hook and he secured a seatbelt. So we've gone for a turtle, but we've messed up, right? So I'm doing that pummel. Nick's got a hook with his right. So I'm going to use my left foot to hook that right hook. I'm going to fall to my hip, extend that leg out, and bring my knee through, blocking this top hook here, trying to keep a good knee-elbow connection. When it's go time, we're going to run like a running man to our right. But again, we need to control this elbow. If I start running and he can post on this elbow, watch how we can maintain a height advantage. And we're not going to get away. If I control this elbow and we go, Nick's trying to come up, we get that underhook and we potentially get a pinning position here. So even if, just to demonstrate how I'm pummeling here, if Nick's got a single hook back control here, essentially what I'm doing before I collapse is just this. We clear it, we bring our knee through, and we block, when it's go time, we control that elbow and we come back on top. And again, just for demonstration purposes, we can do the same from a power half, and we don't have to have that later stage scramble because he doesn't have that seatbelt control. So when he switches from seatbelt to power half, we can still pummel inside, clear out, and again, he doesn't have that same layer of control. So we've got a scrambling position here. Nick starts to turn in. As long as I get under that lower leg, we end up on top here. So it's not the end of the world if you turn a turtle and they get a single hook. Single hook, I would say, is only 20% of the battle to take the back. If you think someone getting a single hook on you is a major victory, then you're already thinking in a losing fashion. But against good guys, single hook basically means nothing. A lot of good guys you can't control from the back unless you really have a body triangle. All right, guys, so we previously covered dealing with a power half. We did it in sort of a conservative manner, and that was a preemptive pummel of our legs so that when they hit the power half and basically get us to a hip and put us to the destination they want, because we've already pummeled our legs, we can easily beat the hooks. So that basically we're conceding the first battle, but getting ahead of them on the second. Obviously, we don't have to be so conservative with every movement. Obviously, if timing is an issue, if time's an issue in the match and we need to get out of here quick, we can take advantage of them cranking our neck to disappear into that pocket and have them fall off and ultimately land in half guard. The movement is going to look like basically a freestyle swim. So when they crank at my neck here, I'm going to disappear and pummel over the top. So Nick has a single hook on me here, just to see what it looks like here. He's cranking my neck here. I'm trying to come up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my left elbow back and retract my arms to have him fall over the top. What I want it to look like is Nick's cranking here, and he's really driving it down with a single hook, and then my neck disappeared, and he falls over the top, and because of that last pummel, we secure the underhook on this side. So Nick's on top of me here. He's got that single hook. We're standing up on the opposite side leg to where he's cranking us here. I'm pulling my elbow back, and I'm going to pummel both like I'm swimming in freestyle. So we come up a little bit first because I want Nick to really crank it here. As he starts to crank it, we're pummeling at elbows and securing that top position. So again, he's cranking me to the right. I'm pulling my elbows back. This is shaking him off the top, and my neck disappears. He falls, and we pummel at that underhook over the top to secure that pinning position. So one more time, guys. We're in our power half here. Nick's really being a prick, and he's cranking him. So we make our neck disappear by turning and pulling our elbows back, and you see him fall over the top, and we can secure the pinning position. So again, the story behind this movement is, on the Ultimate Fighter, I was training with Frank Hickman. He's a wrestling coach from Thailand. He's the wrestling coach for City Kickboxing, wrestling coach for Alex Volkanovski. He hit this on me 3 times, and I thought I better pay attention to how he's doing it. And it's been a very, very effective movement ever since. Guys, so we briefly touched on dealing with single hook seatbelts, and again, you can do it with the power half too, is that conservative option of beating the bottom hook. I just want to do a brief summary of which directions we go from where, depending on whether they have the top side seatbelt or the bottom side seatbelt. So let's say Nick has my back here, and again, we're not doing a back escape instructional, but say he has a single hook, and he has either a seatbelt here or a seatbelt on the other side, right? And let's say we beat these hooks. So basically the situation is we've cleared hooks, and he's got a seatbelt. And again, the 2 options for seatbelt were underhook side on bottom or underhook side on top. So if Nick alternates between the 2, so obviously there's 2 situations where we could end up with a seatbelt, but we don't having to worry about hooks. So just like I was saying previously, when we're dealing with the strangle hand on bottom here, we have to defend, we have to secure the elbow, and we have to start running away. Obviously we're dealing with the hooks as well, and as long as we control this elbow, if Nick tries to follow me, he can't get up easily, and we can secure the top position. So again, if the underhook's on top, we run away. But there's also another scenario here where I'm defending, I'm running away from Nick here, and he's very quick at chasing me. So I'm circling. Sometimes I can actually hop over the top of Nick here and end up on top. So again, when we're dealing with someone that we can't seem to get away from here, I want you to block these hooks, spring your hips up first, and jump over the top. And remember, as long as you control this top leg, Nick tries to turn into me here, very, very difficult, and we can use this to secure top position. But again, when we're in this position, the underhook's not always on top. The underhook sometimes is on bottom. So we alternate these grips here. Now it wouldn't be a good idea for me to turn and run because this underhook's blocking me here. So when the underhook is on bottom, we don't turn and run, we turn in. And the way I'm going to do that is to control the underhook hand. I'm obviously still got this arm here to prevent Nick throwing hooks. It's really only a threat of the top hook. I'm on the ground. Nick can't place the bottom hook. If I lift my hips, he can. But obviously, we wouldn't be that stupid, you'd hope. So again, we're dealing with the top. If the underhook's on bottom, we can't turn and run, we turn and face. So we control this bottom wrist. Nick's trying to chase my back here. I get that elbow cross body here. And I start to walk my hips towards the head to clear these grips. So he's got the seat belt and he's got the underhook on bottom. So we want to control the wrist. We want to control the wrist of the bottom hand. It pins him here in a way that he can't turn to face us easily. I'm blocking the top hook because I don't want him to get this top hook over the top here. Nick throws this one in. we could have some problems here. So we're blocking it. What I want you to do is walk your hips back and place weight on top of them here. If Nick's trying to turn in to face me here, so long as I control this wrist, I can get my elbow to the far side hip. Nick's trying to attack me from here, I just walk my hips back until we can control both sides of the hips. So again, the two scenarios, out of this position, underhook on bottom, we turn in. Underhook on top, we do that pass off where we control the wrist, we control the elbow, and we come on top by running away. So those two situations where someone secured a seatbelt, but we've beaten their hooks, or perhaps they took a seatbelt and didn't secure any hooks. When the underhook's on bottom, we turn in. When the underhook's on top, we turn away. So those would be your two options. But also, it's one of those things, it's a drill I want you guys to practice, because a lot of people think if a guy gets a seatbelt and a single hook, they're like, fuck, the match is basically over. But realistically, if you understand those positions and the goals of your training partners or opponents, we can not only stay safe in those positions, but we can potentially turn them into scrambles that we end up on top in. Guys, I want to briefly touch on this because it does come up out of the turtle position, and that's when guys set up crucifixes. Crucifix is an interesting position. I've rolled with very few people that were actually good at it. I'll say that much. It's not that I don't believe in the position, it's just that I've traveled a ton. I've rolled at every high level gym. Very few people I've ever felt actually were dangerous with the crucifix. One of the only guys I've ever felt threatened with was Barrett Yoshida there, sort of the master at the crucifix. And I think what makes him so good at the crucifix isn't his control, but is his unorthodox entries. So you find yourself in submission threats out of a crucifix before you even really know you're in a crucifix. But generally speaking, most other people, I can see that they're hunting the crucifix so far out, I can take defensive measures to protect myself. And one of those defensive measures I'll show here today. When Nick secures a seatbelt here, a very traditional option is to attack and trap my right arm here. So Nick places that through. So what I want to do when guys do this is I do not want to allow him to hook this arm with his top leg, his right leg here. When he does this, if he rolls through, and we get over to this position here, the fact that it's hooked with this top leg means that he can generate arm bar pressure on it. And when he does that, I want to lift my hips and my chin to relieve it, and gives him exposure to the neck here, and he can start strangling me. So again, if he hooks it with the top leg, we're in trouble. He cannot generate the same braking pressure if I were to hook it with the bottom. When we hook it with the bottom, it's basically like we've entered a Peterson roll or something. And when Nick's trying to attack me out of here, very, very limited options. I can obviously keep the chin tucked. It's actually quite easy for me to turn back into Nick here. So we can take the defensive measure of when he traps that arm. I'll always do this, right? If Nick hits the seatbelt and he starts trapping this arm, I'll throw my wrist through to this side here. If you guys can pay attention to what I've done, when he's trapped the arm, I'm throwing it inside. I'm bringing that hand back to me. So now when Nick goes to roll me through, I can lift this leg, and when Nick's trying to attack me from here, any sort of submission threats, I feel very, very safe. We can start to work our way out, whether that be starting to turn in, because again, we can turn in because there's no armbar threat. If he trapped it with the other leg, if I go to turn in, he starts generating armbar pressure there, and I have to risk getting choked. So one of your best bets is to make sure you always hook that bottom leg. So again, one more time. If you're in danger of a crucifix from here, and they go to trap your arm, don't let him hook it with the outside, the top leg there. Hook it with the bottom. And so now when Nick goes to roll through, it's very easy for me to control him and keep him flat here. When I'm keeping him flat, I'm safe. When he curls me up into a ball here, throws in armbar pressure here, it's very difficult for me to get out. He controls with the top leg, he's in control. If he tries to control with the bottom leg, I'm in control of the position. Because again, if he controls with the bottom leg, Nick tries to keep me curled over here, very easy to come on top. If he controls with the top, and he's supplying that armbar pressure, I can't really force myself back without exposing strangles. So basically what some people think is a good crucifix control is actually sort of a Peterson roll grip, where we can use it to actually control our opponent there.